let me divide this little mini-series differently now, because rather than go to the other document, which is July 9th, I think I should speak about the covering letter which the Holy Father wrote to the Motu Proprio, because he there explains why he is issuing it. And before he does that, he says there were two fears that had arisen when the rumor was about that this Motu Proprio would be issued. And the first and most significant was that it detracted from the authority of the Second Vatican Council. The Pope says, and I quote, "This fear is unfounded." Why does he say it's unfounded? It's unfounded, first of all, because the Mass which was issued after the Council, the Mass of Paul VI, is still going to be the ordinary form, so that no one is being deprived of that form of the liturgy. I want to quote one thing here which is interesting, because some people have said that those who want to go back to the old form of the Mass, and I, by the way, am not one of them, I prefer to celebrate the Novus Ordo Mass, but in a more traditional way, with more Latin, facing east, Gregorian chant, altar rails, first canon, and so on. But those who want to have the old form of the Mass are not simply recalcitrant or schismatic. The Pope says, and I quote, "Many people who clearly accepted the binding nature of the Second Vatican Council," because the criticism is there are people who want the old Mass and they reject the Council, but the Pope says no. Many people who clearly accepted the binding character of the Second Vatican Council and were faithful to the Pope and the bishops, nonetheless also desired to recover the form of the sacred liturgy that was dear to them. This occurred above all because in many places celebrations were not faithful to the prescriptions of the new missal, but the latter actually was understood as authorizing or even requiring creativity, which the Pope says elsewhere is not a concept of liturgical celebration. And this frequently led to deformations of the liturgy which were hard to bear. Now comes an interesting sentence. "I am speaking from experience," the Pope says, "since I too lived through this period with all its hopes and its confusion, and I have seen how arbitrary deformations of the liturgy caused deep pain to individuals totally rooted in the faith of the Church." So this is very important, because the Pope is saying, I'm not writing this document only to bring back those schismatics who have denied the Council and rejected the new Mass. I'm also doing this for the faithful Catholics who accept the Council, have supported the bishops and the Pope, but who nevertheless have recognized a great loss in our liturgical heritage. Well, that's the first fear, detraction from the Council. The second fear is that this will lead to, and I quote, disarray or even divisions within parish communities. The Pope says, "This fear also strikes me as quite unfounded." First of all, he says, and I'll quote this too, "The use of the Old Missal presupposes a certain degree of liturgical formation and some knowledge of the Latin language. Neither of these is found very often." There's kind of a note of sarcastic humor there. There's not going to be some mass movement towards the Old Missal because people aren't formed properly, nor do they know Latin. So it's not going to create, a clear division of opposing sides of equal force in the Church. What he says, though, not only will the new Missal remain the ordinary form, but he is hoping that the two forms will be mutually enriching. Now, I need to pause on that and on another phrase which he used in a previous paragraph here when he talked about his desire to establish a interior reconciliation. Very important words for Benedict XVI. When he says inner or interior, it's very frequent in his thought. It means he's getting to the fundamental, the heart of things. And here, he's not just trying to tell differing factions in the Church, look, get along, let's move on. That's exterior reconciliation, which is ineffective. He's trying to find some deeper principle, underlying principle, which will bring both groups together and to a satisfactory solution. And obviously, if there's only one rite, but there are two forms, then no one should complain, because those who prefer the ordinary form may participate in that, and those who prefer the extraordinary form may do so. So that leads to reconciliation. But there's another kind of reconciliation which is very important. Prior to his election as Pope, he had spoken many times about what he called the discontinuity, breach, rupture, or break. Those are all his words in the liturgical tradition after the council, and the devastation which was wrought. Again, that's his word in public writings. So he has seen a bifurcation, a division take place in the liturgy. He's trying to reconcile not just present-day Catholics with each other, but the whole church of the present day with the church of preceding centuries. He's trying to heal this rupture. He said in his first public address as Pope on April 20th, 2005, that he is committed to implementing the Second Vatican Council in faithful continuity with the Church's 2,000-year tradition. So he does want to implement the council, but he does not want to read it as a council of rupture, but a council of renewal and organic growth. He made that very explicit on December 22nd, 2005, when he spoke to the cardinals of the Roman Curia, and he said there's two hermeneutics of the council. Hermeneutic just means understanding or interpretation. One, a hermeneutic of rupture or discontinuity, and the other, a hermeneutic of development and reform. And he clearly is supporting the hermeneutic of development and reform and showing that that is the ordinary way, the normal way, the only way the church prior to the council had grown and developed. The idea of a rupture is, in his own words, unprecedented. So that is the kind of reconciliation he wants. But note, he says he wants the two forms to be mutually enriching, and he gives examples of what he means. The old form, which he's already said could use the lectionary in the vernacular, which is a change in the direction the council had directed us, but also it can add the new saints that have been canonized since the council. It can introduce perhaps some of the new prefaces. They're actually very old prefaces, but were brought back in the reform after the council. At the same time, he's saying that the new form of Mass should be influenced by the old and celebrated more reverently, with a sense of the sacred, which was so prominent in the old form of the Mass. It seems to me that what he's implying here is he wants to have both of these forms, and he wants them to move towards each other. It'll take time, maybe a generation, maybe 2 generations. But I believe, well, I'm certain actually, because we've actually discussed this before he was Pope, that what he is looking for is what's called a reform of the reform. That is, to take the reform after the council and to reform it so that it's more in continuity with the Mass before the council. How would that take place? For example, one may celebrate the Novus Ordo, the ordinary form of the Mass, in Latin, facing east, with an altar rail, using Canon 1, Gregorian chant, male altar servers. And it comes very close to the outward form of the so-called Tridentine Mass. That would be a way that would be bringing together the riches both of the pre-conciliar Mass and the benefits of the post-conciliar reform. I believe, as I say, that is what the Holy Father is seeking as his long-term goal in this. So that's what the Motu Proprio said, and that's the reason which the Holy Father gave for it. Again, let me put off the section on the Congregation Doctrine of the Faith document and go to another element here of the Motu Proprio,